This is Andi Purewal for Boxing News. I'm joined by Eddie Hearn here in London. Eddie, firstly, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, mate. I've had a nice couple of weeks of no shows. It all changes next week. I think we've got one weekend off from probably September 15th to December 23rd, but excited. You drop your train ticket down there just in case you want to get back. And yeah, looking forward to it. Been watching a bit of boxing, even though you'd think that I wouldn't want to watch boxing. It's my life. That's why we're here today. And yeah, looking forward to a big run coming up.
Let's come on to the reason we're here today. Lynn Athletic Club, you've made a generous donation of £10,000 to keep this club going. Just walk me through how that came about and what you're hoping it achieves for the club.
Well, look, I think this club, everybody knows the Lynn Amateur Boxing Club. It's been open since, I think, 1892. A lot of our fighters have come from here. Ellie Scottney, obviously, has come from here as well. And when I saw, it's about 3 weeks ago now, a post to say we're closing, I couldn't believe it. You know that it's always a risk for these clubs, but you never think it's going to happen. You always rely on someone's going to come up with the money, and that's how these places work. And I made a call and I said, look, how much do you need? Because we can't let this place evaporate into thin air. And they told me, and we put the money up and told them to get underway with the work. So that's going on now. We'll reopen the week of Jordan Thompson and Ellie Scottney fight week, I think at 28th of September. But Andy, this place has hundreds of members. Like, can you imagine a boxing club that's open every single night in Peckham, Camberwell down there, Streatham, wherever is around, that all of a sudden all these kids have nowhere to go, nowhere to train. I mean, the fact that we got them here in the first place to change their lives, now you've got to let them go. I find it baffling that the government, local council, it's not a lot of money to make sure this place can keep its doors open. And I just think for the problems out on the street, the problems that the younger generation face, these places, I'm not saying they're the total solution, but they can go a huge way to fix it or to change the mentality of kids. And we couldn't let it die. So it doesn't mean that in 6 months' time they're not going to need more money, because they are, and that's something that Alex Gravel is across in terms of making sure we can keep funding rolling to these clubs. And it has to come from the government level. We can't just rely on us to pull up money and save every club in the country. But places like this, they cannot die. I mean, this is the beating heart of boxing. So delighted to make sure they can open their doors and stay open.
Seems to be an unfortunate situation where quite a few amateur clubs are struggling at the minute. What do you make of the state of amateur boxing?
Look, everybody's struggling anyway, So, but amateur clubs, the problem is that they're all self-funded. I mean, even the volunteers. You've got people here today. They don't just dedicate their time to this place. They dedicate their life to this place. You're relying on coaches and volunteers to come down every night of the week and give 2 or 3 hours a night for nothing, just to make sure that kids have somewhere to be. And I feel like the government and the council have a responsibility to provide facilities like this. You know what boxing can deliver. You've heard it from me a million times. But there's not a kid that hasn't walked through the doors of an amateur boxing club that hasn't improved their life. And what you're doing by closing them is you're taking all those kids that you've changed, all those kids that you've given positivity to, and putting them all back there again in the negativity. You know what I mean? It's a waste of time. So I need to open those conversations at government level, and I'll be pushing to do it.
Eddie, you said at the beginning of this interview you've been keeping your eye on the boxing. Obviously, this past weekend, the fight you'd have been very intrigued by. Saw Eubank Jr. reverse the result from his first fight with Liam Smith. What did you make of his performance in that?
It's really good. I mean, again, I feel like when someone puts a good performance together, we always look at the other person, don't we, and go, oh, Liam Smith was weight drained, he was injured. But let's just focus on Eubank was trying to save his career. Thought he boxed really well. He looked completely different on the scales. I believe he has a new nutritionist now or something, or looked in great shape. I thought Liam was disappointing, to balloon like that, to lose that weight at 160 especially, and his legs just look weird. So he'll be really kicking himself. But a good win for Eubank and massive for his career. He moves on now, whether it's Conor Benn or whoever it is. He's got a lot of options and massive win for him.
I mean, just on Conor Benn, obviously I've seen your post saying that you want to try and get the talks going and moving on that front. Where do things currently stand? When will you look?
Great meeting with Kalle Sauerland yesterday. Look, I want the fight. Kalle wants the fight. It's the biggest fight for Eubank. It's the biggest fight for Ben. Generally, that's a good starting point. We're talking now about a potential December fight, looking at some big stadiums for that. I'd be very surprised if it doesn't happen, honestly, now, Yeah. I mean, look, there's conversations to see if Conor Benn fights at the end of September. Orlando is one option. September 30th is another. We're in conversations with the British Boxing Board of Control about that as well. I would like him to have a little run out before. He's been out of the ring for over a year and a half. It's a massive fight to go into. He's ready to fight anyone at any time. But I think Tony Sims would prefer him just to bank a quick run out. But yeah, certainly in terms of talks for that fight, they're definitely underway. There's work to do, but the biggest fight and biggest opportunity for both of them, so fingers crossed.
How quickly would you like to see them progress then?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're looking at, when you talk about December 16 is Sonny Edwards against Bam. So you've got 2nd, 9th or 23rd. We're in September. So really you want to try and conclude a deal by the end of September. It's going to sell very quickly, but still you want a nice time to build up for the promotion of that fight. So, 3 weeks to get a deal done.
Eddie, one thing I'm interested by is Kalle Sauerland said last week that no talks or negotiations had taken place to try and make Eubank Jr-Benn, whilst all the talk of a rematch with Liam Smith was going on. I said to him, well, that means either you're lying or that means Eddie's lying. He said to ask you, so which way is it?
Calle's a good friend of mine, but yeah, there was that fight was definitely discussed at length at a number of sites. But obviously, look, they had a contractual situation as well, and that's the past. We've always wanted to make that fight. From the time we signed that first contract to now, nothing's changed. Everybody wants that fight. It just so happens now it's bigger than ever.
I want to get your thoughts on VADA testing. No VADA testing this past weekend for the main event. What did you make of it?
I mean, you've seen a couple of my rants. I just find it baffling that, I'm being told that Chris Eubank was only tested on fight week by UKAD. Like, I'm sure he's a clean athlete and everything. And Liam Smith tested once or maybe twice. And now you're getting people that are coming out saying, no, if there's UKAD testing, that's enough. You don't need VADA testing. It's confusing. Are you mad? Both. Especially with a fight of that magnitude when there's a pay-per-view event, I don't understand why you wouldn't just do it. So, completely shocked that there was no testing from VADA for that event. And, even more testing to see, concerning to see that other fighters, we know that. By the way, I have to compliment the board and UKAD in terms of their random testing. They're one of the few commissions that actually do it, and it's expensive, right? But at the same time, when you've got a fighter like, Dave Allen, who says, I haven't been tested the whole camp or before, and I wasn't tested on fight night, that's concerning. That's why you have to implement additional layers of testing, and you've got to pay for it, because everybody keeps talking about UKAD being under-resourced and not tested enough. But yet now they're saying, oh no, you don't want VADA as well. That's confusing, too many agencies. Come on. They're just trying to save money. So as you'll see now from VADA's Twitter, every show we're doing now carries VADA testing. I'm sending out wiring money left, right and centre. But if you're now telling me that UKAD's okay on its own, even though they're not testing people, all right, we'll do that. But that's not really working in the best interest of the sport and trying to keep it as safe as possible. So we've had great feedback in the last week from people saying, we really like what you're doing. Even when Cusumano tested positive, which wasn't even our test, the feedback from me was, well done, that's another one. It's like, well, we don't want too many, but it might get worse before it gets better because of the volatility or the levels of testing.
Eddie, just with you, Cad, I did an interview with Joe Mack yesterday, and he said that obviously when Beefy was trying to cut his weight, he wanted to go do a urine test, and it took him a while to be able to get the urine together to be able to go and do that. So he said to the doctor, why can't you just do his blood? And the doctor said he's not qualified to do so. Is that not an issue if UKAD are not able to take blood tests? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, we all know UKAD are under-resourced because of probably the amount of money the board pay them. It's not really the board have a tough job in this respect. But from what you've just said there, you have got people, and I don't mind saying Simon Jordan particularly, who says UKAD's all right. Oh, we don't need VADA because of the mess with Conor Benn, we should just use UKAD. Look at what you've just heard there. Look at Eubank getting tested just on fight week. How dangerous is that? And you're saying that's sufficient. This is people that don't know what they're talking about. Pay the money for additional testing. We need to do it, and we need to all come together to make sure that when there is an adverse finding. See, I've got to give props to the New York State Athletic Commission. They wrote to us this week and said, there's been an adverse finding, we're dealing with it, we're putting forward this, could be a no contest, could be this, but there's a full investigation, and we'll let you know. I thought, brilliant. That's exactly what we want, because other people are too scared to deal with stuff and handle it. We can't handle a disciplinary matter. So let's just make sure that there's as much testing as possible happening to keep this sport safe.
What can you tell me about Joe Cusumano's positive test?
Just that we don't know anything about the substance. I don't know anything at all. We received an email from the New York State Athletic Commission to say there was an adverse finding in his post-fight test. They are dealing with it. It's going to their disciplinary board, etc., etc. It was their test. That's why it takes a little bit longer, because obviously when you pay more money, you get the results quicker, etc. But yeah, their test, their disciplinary process, and all very professional.
Eddie, I haven't seen anything, from Joe Cusumano to kind of speak out on his behalf on it, but obviously when Conor failed his test, you was adamant that you believe that it wasn't intentional, however it's happened. Do you feel the same about Alicia Baumgardner, Dillian Whyte, Robert Lanius, all of them releasing statements saying that they have no idea what's gone on? Do you believe they're as innocent as what Conor was and when you backed him?
It's very different when you know someone and you've known someone for 5 or 6 years and have a very close relationship. You know their trainer, you know their team inside out, you deal with them every day, you speak to them every day. It's very different when you get a kid in the office 24 times, being grilled, being spoken to by lawyers. You can make your own assumptions of whether you think he's innocent. I haven't had those same conversations. Since the news was given to Dillian Whyte's team, I've not spoke to Dillian Whyte or his representatives since that day. Alicia Baumgardner I've spoken to. She's upset. I'm sure I'll catch up with her in Orlando. I always want to believe Joe Cusumano I've never met before in my life other than hello at a press conference. Helenius the same. You always want to believe a fighter is innocent. You can't ignore the findings. When you know someone personally, you have the opportunity to give your opinion. And my opinion on Conor Benn is he's 100% innocent. Alicia Baumgardner, I would like to believe as well that she's innocent, but they have to go through the process. And that process has taken Conor Benn over a year. But what is the process? That's really what counts and what matters. It's another matchroom fighter. Helenius is not a matchroom fighter. Cusumano is not a matchroom fighter. Dillian Whyte is not a matchroom fighter. But they have failed tests on our shows. And if we were doing, 500 tests last year, and we're now doing 5,000 tests, I'm just throwing numbers out there, what do you think? You're going to have more adverse findings. So I just hope the same energy is on other promoters as well to pay for it. So when there's a show, ask the question, is there VADA testing? No, there's not. Just say, we couldn't afford it. But that shouldn't be the case on a pay-per-view event, where you're charging the public extra money. Even the broadcaster should be saying, we need to make sure there's VADA testing there.
Eddie, just moving away from the testing, we've seen that Queensberry have launched an official appeal over the Usyk-Dubois results. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I understand it. I said, if that was Anthony Joshua, do you think Frank Warren would be saying it was a legal blow or a not a legal blow? So he has a job to do. They're going to try and position him back at number 2 or 1. They know they're not going to get a rematch. They know it's not going to be no contest, but you just go through the process. In my opinion, it was 100% a low blow. But good luck to him, who knows what could happen.
Your man Tony Bellew has released a few comments suggesting that Fury-Joshua talks are back underway in the background, and Wilder-Joshua talks have somewhat come to a halt. Can you fill us in?
No, I don't know where he got that from. There's definitely conversations. There isn't. Talk about AJ against Fury. There's no negotiations. There is a mindset that do we just go straight into that fight? Instead of doing the Wilder fight, but honestly, there's been no negotiations, no advanced talks, nothing at all in that respect. Our focus is on Deontay Wilder. We have agreed our number with Saudi Arabia, but it's still got to get papered, it's got to get done properly, and there will be a time where you'll run out of time and we'll just fight in December. But at the moment, we're fine. We've got a few weeks to try and make that happen. There is a lot of internal stuff going on in Saudi, boxing and stuff like that. But for us, that's the fight we want. And if it's not Wilder, and that's pushed to February or March, there is a chance AJ fights in December.
Why is it that the Wilder fight you don't feel as confident now as opposed to, say, 3-4 months ago when you said it was basically set for December?
Because how long it's taking. At that point, when you sit down with someone and they say, it's done, and you believe in them and you've done deals with them in the future, I'm very confident the fight happens. The fact that it's taken an additional month, and part of that reason was they didn't want to have a conversation until AJ fought in August. Now that's happened. Obviously, once something takes longer, you start to doubt whether it's going to get done in January. But we're in for our number, Wilder's in for his number. It's really over to them to see if they want to make that fight.
I thought it was taking advantage somewhat of the amount of money that the representatives of Saudi Arabia are willing to put into the sport.
They're taking advantage of it.
I think it's harsh to say because boxers deserve to get paid the maximum amount, don't get me wrong.
If they obviously have built a commercial value like Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, where that fight has huge commercial value. You get made an offer, you negotiate that offer, you accept that offer, and then you move forward. No different to any other sport. But should they take advantage of a good offer? Yeah.
Maybe just a couple more from me. On the back of the Abu Dhabi show last year, you said you wanted to try and return there 3 or 4 times in the coming year. Obviously, we're in September now. We haven't been back. Why is that?
Because we were going to do Eubank Benn there, but unfortunately we ran out of time, and that kind of kicked everything back. We are in talks with them about doing a show in December. It's a big heavyweight fight. I won't talk too much more about that. And also talks have reignited there about Benn Eubank, because that now becomes a monster fight again, whereas before, when we were going to do the fight there, Eubank got beat, etc., etc. So, we still intend to do a show there this year. We've got another deal to be announced internationally of 3 to 4 shows a year, which hopefully will be announced in the next 2 weeks. But, very keen to return to Abu Dhabi in December.
So you've also reached out to Top Rank to try and make Taylor-Catterall too. Can you talk to me about that, and what weight would you look to be at? Yeah,
just a conversation with Carl Moretti saying, look, I'd like to make that fight. And he said, we're up for that. Let us know how you see it working. I see the fight at about 143 pounds. Obviously, Josh Taylor, I think he wants to move up from 140, but Jackie's at 140. He's got to fight Linares and he's got to beat him. But if he does, hopefully we can make that fight for January, February 2024.
Final one, somebody you know very well, Canelo facing Charlo in a few weeks' time. What do you make of that fight? What do you expect?
I think it's a good fight. I mean, I expect Canelo to be too big for Charlo. You see that the height, Charlo has the height, but when you talk about the thickness and the size, he's a lot smaller than Canelo Alvarez, but Canelo still has a little bit to prove coming off, the injuries and stuff like that on the John Ryder fight. So he looks great in camp. I back him to win, but I think it'll be a good fight.
Eddie, I appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Mate, thank you.